I'm going to actually transition into our next presenter, and that is going to be Dr. Nabanita Modak Fisher. She will be presenting on the overview of proposed amendments to other solid waste incineration unit standards. Before we do that, I do have a few more minutes to just let you know that we have a full day of programming. As you notice, there's no breaks in between, because as a caller from your home or place of employment, you're always welcome to keep the feed going throughout the day until we're finished, and you can take a break at any time. And so we purposefully did not schedule breaks in our programming. We'd like for you all to stay on throughout the day and take your leisure at getting yourself fed and having your needs met. So that's why we're not going into breaks. So we're going to transition over to Dr. Modak Fisher.
Thank you. I hope we all can see my screen. My name is Nabanita Modak Fisher. I work for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and I'm going to, my expertise is in the combustion and incineration, which is why I'm here today in front of all of you to talk about the proposed rule, which will be finalized May next year. And this has a huge impact on the tribal community, their villages. And I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk to all of you and share what the proposed amendments are and how this is going to affect your day-to-day activities as far as the burn units in different tribal villages are concerned. So with that introduction, let us jump in. The rule is called Other Solid Waste Incineration Review, and it's a proposed rule. We are going to talk about Clean Air Act, because this is an air emission control rule, and what kind of incinerators we are trying to regulate through this rule. There is a court order deadline because the court ordered us to do this rule. The highlights and the amendments, which will be my main focus today. Another main focus, which I really appreciate this platform has given me to, is the stakeholder engagement, which is a very significant part of this rulemaking. The comment period, because we do have a very defined comment period, and I'll be glad to take any question and answer if we have time here, and if we don't have time today during my session, talking session, I will be staying here, and you can ask me questions through the chat room, and I'll be happy to answer. This is coming under Clean Air Act Section 129, which usually regulates 9 pollutants, which are dioxin, furans, lead, cadmium, mercury, hydrogen chloride, sulfur dioxide, particulate matter, and NOx. We do need federal permitting, and we are proposing this rule as a review of an original rule which was done back in 2005, the Other Solid Waste Incineration Rule. Basically, we have 2 kinds of incinerators. One is called very small municipal waste combustor. Municipal waste is basically the household waste. Is the paper, wood, yard waste, food waste, plastic, leather, rubber, kitchen waste. You have mostly, which is very common, incinerators in the tribal villages. You guys collect your household waste, pile up in the landfill, and burn it in a burn unit, or a burn cage, or a burn box, or a burn barrel. These all are very small municipal waste combustor, because they all have less than 35 tons per day, because they are very small, and you burn way more than 30% municipal solid waste. You burn almost like 100% of those kind of waste. So what you have in the tribal villages, no matter what you name it, it may name, as I said, burn barrel, burn box, burn unit, burn cage. It's all very small municipal waste combustor. And the second type of category which this rule is going to regulate is the institutional waste incinerators. What are they? The incinerators located in Denali National Park, the incinerator located in federal prison, in any national park, in a school in tribal village, if they have a burn unit where they are burning their school waste, that will be an institutional waste incinerator. So this rule intends to regulate those two types of special units. As I said, it covers all different sorts of incinerator. You may name it, it will be here. It can be very basic unit like burn cage, burn barrel, burn boxes. It can be very sophisticated incinerator, which you see in an industrial setup, have a stack, have a control technology. The rule also regulates air curtain incinerators, which usually you dig a trench, you have an air curtain, flow the air, and you burn 100% wood waste, 100% clean lumber, 100% yard waste, or mixture of those. Those will be also regulated by the other solid waste incineration rule. We have developed an inventory, but we did not have enough time to go out to every state and the stakeholder to collect the data because of the court order deadline. So whatever inventory we currently have is actually based on the internet search and the state permit database search. It's no way a very, big, wide inventory with full of data, but we have done our best to do a robust internet search, giving the very limited time code has given. And based on that data, what we have collected through internet search, we believe most of the units which will be regulated by the other solid waste incineration rule is the small businesses and the tribes. These are mostly operated in batch mode. As I said, that people normally pile up their waste. They collect from different houses in the villages in piles until there are enough waste, and they throw it in the burn unit. So these are operated in batch mode. They are very basic design. They don't have any proper control associated with it, and these are very small. We do have a court order deadline because we were supposed to review this rule back in 2010. EPA could not do the review of the 2010, and we got sued by the environmental group, and we lost the case in the court, and the court put us on a court order deadline. We were supposed to publish the rule, the proposal, August 31st, which is why the publication of the rule happened in the Federal Register on August 31st, 2020, and we have a deadline for the final promulgation of the rule. We have to finalize this rule by May 31st, 2021. And these all are court order deadlines, so these are dead set deadlines for this rule. The proposal highlights. We had Clean Air Act have put some obligation for EPA that how we need to do those rules. We have to see what kind of things have changed between when the rule was originally promulgated in 2005 and now in 2020. In 15 years, how are the units have changed? Is there any change in processing? Is there change in the operating of the unit? Is there a change the control technology of the unit? So we had to see those things, and the limited data set we have developed, we could not identify any new development. So the changes we have proposed in 2020 rule are not solely based on that review, but we had a regulatory history. We have, as you all know, and that has been a concern for the tribal, there were a bunch of exclusions in 2005 rule. Some of the exclusions were to exclude the units owned by the tribes, especially Alaskan tribes, for the units if those units are located in Class 2 and Class 3 landfill areas. So EPA went ahead and excluded those units in 2005. But in 2007, EPA lost a court case, and court told EPA that we don't have the right, we don't have the discretion to exclude those units. In other words, court literally told us, if there is a unit burning any kind of waste and any amount of waste, EPA has a legal obligation to regulate that unit. Doesn't matter where the unit is located at, doesn't matter what you name it, doesn't matter how much waste you are burning. If you are burning waste in any unit, that unit needs to be regulated. We have intended to give relaxation to the tribes, and we have intended to keep that exclusion in the proposal. Having said that, it's very important for every tribe to know, just because the exclusions are in the proposal, it's not guaranteed it will be in the final rule. Because of the court decision, because of the legal vulnerability we have taken by keeping those exclusions, because court has clearly told us we cannot keep those exclusions. But we have kept it in the proposal to receive comments from stakeholders that what are the consequences of keeping those exclusions, or what are the consequences of taking away those exclusions. So if you think as a stakeholder that just because the proposal is keeping these exclusions, the final rule will also be having those exclusions, that I would say perhaps a wrong conception. You need to be more cautious about that assumption, because as I said, there is no guarantee the final rule will also keep those exclusions. So the Alaskan exclusions about the class 2, class 3 landfill areas, units owned by the tribes, there is no guarantee that exclusion will stay in the final rule. And all those exclusions, and there were other effects were there in 2005 rule, which EPA decided to take a remand on the rule. Means EPA said that we need to fix certain things in this rule. That doesn't mean the rule is not in effect. The rule still is in effect, but we take an opportunity to fix the rule. And in 2020, we took that opportunity and we decided to fix something in the rule. And the first thing we did is we were further subcategorization, because we realized most of the units owned by the tribes and the small businesses are very small, perhaps less than 10 tons per day. So we created a subcategory which only exclusively for those units, like less than equal 10 tons per day. The next thing we have proposed, we have revised our emission limits. If you look at the rule today and rule in 2005, you will see a significant difference between the emission limits for the smaller units, which is units like you, which is units that has capacity less than 10 tons per day, units owned by the tribes. They have a revised emission limits, which EPA believes that could be achieved by the tribes or by the small businesses. The next thing is the testing and monitoring. I would like you to pay additional attention to this particular provision. During the rulemaking, I appreciate the engagement of the tribes. They have sent me at least 9 to 10 letters describing their concern about testing and monitoring. In every letter I have read, they have categorically told me that how they cannot have testing done in their unit. They cannot have a person coming to their unit and do the testing. I'm here to tell you that the proposed rule does not require any testing. So this is important for you to know as tribal leaders who are sitting here, to let your community know that when they come back and say that we cannot do testing, it might not mean anything to this proposed rule, because the proposed rule is already asking you that there is no testing. All it is asking you, if your tribal community has a burn cage or burn box, go there and find out other 10 burn boxes owned by other 10 tribal communities, get together, do a one-time testing on one of the unit, not every year, just one-time testing, just on one unit, and rest of the units, go ahead and write down what amount of waste they are burning and what kind of waste they are burning. Basically, keeping a record what you are burning and how much you are burning. So you don't have to do any testing. That's why it is important for, as tribal leaders, for you to know that your community need to understand that the proposed rule, EPA has made those changes considering the units owned by tribes and small business, recognizing that they may not be in a position to do the testing because these are very small units. They may not even have a stack to conduct testing. They may not have the financial ability to conduct the testing. This is why the agency went above and beyond and actually did away with the annual stack testing. And all that they are asking that do only one-time testing on one unit, get together with other people, and do one-time testing on one unit and burn similar kind of waste and similar amount of waste and write down what you are burning and how much you are burning. And that's it. Nothing more than that. So tomorrow, when you, as a tribal community, go ahead and engage in the rulemaking process, we would like you to tell us during this comment period, does this relaxed testing monitoring approach or increased flexible testing monitoring approach work for your community? If it doesn't work for your community, why doesn't it work for your community? Is it something you have a unit that cannot do that kind of record keeping, like writing down how much you are burning, what you are burning? Is it because of your geographical location? Is it resources? Those kind of comments we encourage to let the agency know during this comment period. We want you to know that if you think your unit cannot comply, why? Why can't your unit comply with the testing and monitoring? We have specifically solicited comments. We are asking our communities, our stakeholders to comment on our testing and monitoring. So I'm telling here that what kind of comments you could provide to the agency, which will help agency making a final rule that could cater and address the problem your community is facing. I also want to tell you that EPA is not against burning. EPA is telling you burn, but you burn within the Clean Air Act legitimacy criteria. That's why, and we also recognize what you could do within the Clean Air Act permissibility. So that's why it's important for us to know that if the testing and monitoring flexible testing and monitoring approach works for you. And if it works for you, let us know that yes, it works for us, but we need additional information. Please tell us, how do we find 10 other units? Where do we do it? How do we do it? That's something, and that's something you can actually ask EPA to request a consultation. You can request EPA that we need more consultation on your rule to know about how to get those information, or like through the comment period. So those are the things you should ask EPA for consultation so that EPA can help you understand this rule better or understand what kind of information you may want to provide during this comment period. We have also increased the record keeping and reporting flexibilities. As I said, all you need to do, write down what you are burning and how much you are burning, and that's it about your record keeping and reporting. This is something to do with the small businesses where we have gone ahead and changes that if the small businesses are burning more than 30% municipal type solid waste, like the household waste, they will be regulated by this rule. We do have startup shutdown and malfunction. Again, I encourage you, if you have, that should not affect you directly because as I said, the startup shutdown and malfunction also, you just need to write down what you are burning and how much you are burning. And the electronic reporting, the record you are keeping it on a weekly basis about your type of waste you are burning and how much you are burning is basically writing it down and hit the button and send it to EPA. We do have Title V permitting requirement changing. We are asking the air curtain incinerators, which are burning 100% wood waste and clean yard waste and clean lumber, they will not require Title V permit. Having said that, if they throw kitchen waste there, they will require Title V permit. And there are other technical edits. This is something I can't emphasize enough. I know you guys have reached out to me. I know we have done some of the consultation. This has been extremely helpful for EPA because, as I mentioned, we were under time crunch when we were writing the proposal of the rule. We could not do an extensive outsource or information collection request. So we did not have enough data. We did not have enough information to correctly capture or characterize the unit. So the tribes who have requested consultation, shared information, or asked for informational briefing has been very, very helpful to EPA. Your letters have been extremely helpful to EPA to know what kind of situation your community is facing. So keeping that in mind, I can't emphasize enough how much engagement I would appreciate, or as an agency, EPA would appreciate to be engaged during this rulemaking. If you think your concern should be addressed, please be engaged. Please ask for consultation. Please encourage your community to ask EPA for consultation. Please encourage your community to submit comment. Submit comment which could be helpful making the final rule to address your concern. Provide necessary information. And during consultation, you could get a clue what would be a helpful information that could help EPA address your issue. So a robust stakeholder engagement is the key to develop a fully informed rule. And I can't emphasize enough for you to be engaged in robust stakeholder engagement. We published the proposal in the Federal Register on August 31st, 2020. We have 45 days comment period. We could not go more than 45 days because we have a court-ordered deadline for the final rule, that the final rule needs to be promulgated or must be promulgated by May 31st. So we have only 45 days public comment period, and the consultation and comment, everything needs to be done by October 15th, 2020. For updates on the rulemaking, here is the website where you can go and read the rule. You can ask your state, you can ask your leaders, you can ask EPA if you have questions about the rule. Here are my contacts, and tribal contact is Tony Colon. If you decide, as I said, you need tribal consultation to understand about the flexible testing and monitoring approach, to understand what this rule would do to you, to understand about the exclusion. If they go away, what you need to do, how you need to comply. Ask for tribal consultation and please contact Tony Colon. With this, I'm at the end of my slide, and I think I have almost no time left. And I'll be happy to stay here and take your question if you have any through the chat room.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your presentation. And yes, please, Dr. Fisher, stay on in the chat room and answer any questions. So I would like just people to realize that you have the ability to ask questions in the chat, and our presenters will join in after their session and answer any questions that you may have. So we're going to be transitioning to Jessica Snyder and Jason White in just a moment. But I want to say hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us and through the afternoon. Just so you know, we actually have people who are presenting and tuning in from Alaska all the way to Washington, D.C. And so we're spanning multiple time zones, and this has been a wonderful coordinated effort between our platform providers and our technical assistants and all of our presenters. So this is beautiful to see everybody coming in and joining and the energy that's behind this. So good preparation, and I'm thankful to be working with all of you today. And